You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building. Goes by the name of David Peisner or Peisner. Which one is it?
It's Peisner.
Peisner. Welcome.
Author
of Homie Don't Play That.
I'm good. How you doing?
Now, this is the story of In Living Color.
It is.
Now, let's talk about it a little bit. Now, In Living Color was one of my favorite shows on television growing up as a kid.
It's funny, when Marlon Wayans was here last, I said, man, somebody needs to do a documentary. Like, Netflix needs to do like a 13-episode documentary on In Living Color, and here you come with the book.
Well, hopefully somebody else is listening and they're going to turn my book into a 13-episode documentary.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I pretty much finished this book, and I have to say there were a lot of interesting anecdotes in here because we watch a show like In Living Color and don't even understand what happened what went on behind the scenes to make a show like that happen. And what I appreciate is you started off talking about Kenan and Ivory Wayans before In Living Color, and the whole entire climate of what was happening with black television, with black comedy, and how there was no real outlet for black comedians at that time.
Yeah. I mean, in the, sort of 70s and 80s, up until kind of like the mid-80s, especially television was just really a wasteland if you're a black comedian, really a black actor. I mean, there were, you had like Jimmy Walker, you had a couple of things, you had the Jeffersons, but for the most part, especially as a creative, as somebody who's going to run the show, there were no opportunities.
So what made you so intrigued with In Living Color?
Yeah, because you don't look like an expert in black holes. I don't know why.
You don't know
I don't know. It's something
maybe
weird
black
about
shirt.
me.
Maybe the black shirt.
Yeah. So, I mean, for starters, I was a huge fan of the show, like growing up. I write a lot about just magazine stories and stuff about pop culture, about hip hop, about comedy. But I started thinking about this show, and it stood out so much at that time. Like, it was so different from everything else that was on TV. And then I started to think about where we are now in black culture and in pop culture in general. And the show was kind of part of this hinge moment where it wasn't just In Living Color, but you had In Living Color, you had Arsenio, you had Spike Lee movies, you had House Party. There was a lot of
Martin
things.
was around that time,
Yeah.
Living Single.
Exactly. So you had all these things happening. And if you look at the time before then, like I was just talking about, where there was really nothing going on, and then you look at the time that we're in now, we're basically black culture is popular culture. It's like the center of everything.
There you go.
now.
I'm so happy to hear a white person say that. I've been in these meetings saying the same thing. Hip hop is pop culture. Blackness is pop
everything.
culture.
It's not just hip hop. It's in everything. It sets the agenda. And so, how do you get from where it was really on the fringes to being right in the center? And I feel like this moment in like the late 80s, early 90s was really key. And In Living Color was kind of a way to tell that whole story.
Was Kenan and Ivory Wayans receptive to doing this? Because I see you did do interviews with cast members, and we learned a lot of things, and we'll get into that. But was he receptive to doing this book? How did you actually approach him?
Well, I would say the short answer is he wasn't that receptive to it. So what happened is at the beginning, this actually started out as a magazine story. And when it was a magazine story, I talked to Keenan at length. I talked to him 2 or 3 times for probably about 3 hours. Really dove in. Like, he was great. When I actually got the contract for the book, I went back to him. I texted him. I said, this book's happening. Maybe we can talk again. And he basically what he said to me was, like, he had another project, like an In Living Color kind of legacy project that he was working on, and he was worried that the book was going to compete with it, so he had mixed feelings about it. And so that was kind of that. I mean, that was literally the last time I talked to him. That was, I kept trying to get him involved, but I mean, in the end, I had already spoken to him for 3 hours. I had talked to him about most of the things I needed to talk to him about. Of course, it would have been
nice to have his blessing.
Would have been nice to have his blessing. It would have been nice to have him at this point sitting next to me talking about how great the book is. But, I
get it, though. Because it's kind of like if somebody wanted to write a story on The Breakfast Club. If it's for a magazine, you'd be like, all right, I'll do an interview. But then when they say it's for a book, you feel like I'm not going to give you that content.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
write my own book.
I write my own book.
Right. And I don't begrudge him that, and I'm not,
He's just saying this is what happened.
Right, this is what, I think he, I actually don't even know enough to say, like, I thought, like, he's probably talking about maybe writing a memoir or something. Mm-hmm. and which I think I'd read.
Hell yeah.
And so to me, I thought, well, this book is only going to help whatever you're doing, because what I'm saying here in this book is that this project, which everyone knows you for, this thing that is probably the most important thing you've ever done, sort of in your career, was not just a great show, was not just a funny show, but it was important, and its legacy was important. And I feel like that only enhances his own, personal thing.
Because it's not necessarily about his personal life. This is really about
right. Yeah.
his show in the, yeah.
Right. I mean, the only stuff. I mean, there's the only stuff. I mean, there, like you were saying, there's the stuff about his early life and growing up in New York and things like that, and his family, which obviously a huge part of it. But it's not then he had kids and then he dated this person.
Right.
And it's not like that's not the story I was telling.
What makes you an authority to be able to write this book?
I mean, that's a good question, and I thought about it a lot while I was writing it. I think that really what makes me an authority is that I did the research and I talked to 100 and some people, and I knew this show, I knew the shows around it. A lot of. I was, you were joking, or maybe not joking, about that I don't look like an authority on black culture.
I definitely wasn't joking about that.
And, this is a story about black culture. And there is that question of, who am I, some white guy, to write about it? And, I think if I was swooping in at, right after the show went off the air, this story has been sitting around. No one's been telling it for 25 years. And so it's like...
But you know what? Some people will say, why is it your place to tell the story?
Well, and the only reason...
Right.
And you said swooping in, which makes me think of a culture vulture.
No. It's exactly right. And I thought about this stuff all the time, and it's kind of like, well, is anyone going to tell this story? I mean...
Because anybody could step up to the plate and tell the story if they wanted to.
Exactly. And the thing is, if Toure, if Wesley Morris, if some other African-American writer had brought this book proposal, I'm sure
it would have gotten picked up as well.
It would have gotten picked up as well. And the thing is that it probably would have been maybe a different book, or a somewhat different book. I mean, I think the facts are more or less the same, but I don't pretend to know what I don't know. Like I come to it with my lifetime of experiences, which is different from somebody else's, regardless of what color you are.
So you're just a fan with a love and admiration for In Living Color. You decided to write about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And from a journalistic approach, because you did do a lot of interviews. Now, for those interviews, most of them, because you even interviewed Jim Carrey, and you detailed a lot of things that went on behind the scenes. And you
not
talked
an easy
to,
interview to get, by the way.
No.
That's what I was thinking when I was reading it, because I was wondering, is Jim Carrey going to be in this book? So how did that happen?
Well, as I told somebody recently, I spent about 2 years trying to massage that to get, to get the interview. And, so I spent about 2 years and talked to him on the phone for an hour. So it was, yeah. I mean, I would have been bummed if I didn't get him.
Right.
But, I would have moved on. But that was definitely the hardest one to get.
Well, here's a fun fact. Ace Ventura, actually, that character was born out of a meeting that happened in Living Color with Kenan and Wayans, if you want to tell that story.
Yeah, it's a funny story. So they're at a table read, and this is probably season 3, season 4. They're at a table read. They're going over the script, and Jim had this character that he wanted to do, and Keenan cut that character, didn't like the sketch, and instead moved that character to having one line in a different sketch, and Jim was pissed. So they're sitting at this table read, and it gets to the point where it's Jim's one line in the sketch, and Jim is fuming. And so his line comes around, Jim stands up, puts his butt in Keenan's face, and reads the line out of his ass. And
he farts?
No, he just reads he does. You remember Ace Ventura? You see Ace Ventura?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he has the whole thing where he's talking out of his ass.
Got you.
And so he did that, just off the top of his head at that table read. Now, meanwhile, Keenan was not at all pleased about this. It was like
Jim
this.
Carrey had to apologize.
It was like this ultimate moment of disrespect in a way that no one disrespected Keenan at
Hey,
the
put
show.
your ass in my face.
Yeah, exactly. And so they like got nose to nose, and it almost got somebody stepped in between. Cooler heads prevailed, but that was the sort of founding moment of that idea.
I wonder if they cool now. That's what I always wonder.
I mean, the thing is, everyone I talk to, especially with regards to Keenan, like Keenan was a tough boss, and he would admit the same thing. He had his ideas. He felt like he knew how to run the show, and
he did,
and he did
clearly.
exactly, and he did. But there were people who didn't like his style of leadership, but everyone respected him.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the people who were like, Keenan gave me a hard time. He didn't put me on the show enough. Everyone respected him. Everyone believed that he knew comedy and knew what he was doing. And so, in terms of personal stuff, like the thing with Jim and Keenan, I think was pretty much quashed, within, a day of it happening. And I'm sure there's probably been other friction over the years, but I didn't sense like too many people who had like real lingering animosity. Yeah.
Now, people also had an issue with nepotism on the show.
Sure.
Because, of course, Kenan Ivory Wayans had Damon Wayans, who was the most popular person on In Living Color, I would say, right?
Certainly for the first 2 years.
And then Kim Wayans was on there. Then he brought on Sean Wayans, who couldn't even DJ. I remember that back in the day. He was the DJ on the show, but didn't know how to DJ.
Yeah. Nothing was connected. The chords were not connected to.
Give him a look though.
Yeah.
DJ,
That's exactly it. And Keenan and Sean both admitted that. But he looked cool. And
He was the only person that probably didn't deserve to be in a position though. 'Cause Marlon was funny.
Yeah.
I think of Mr. Ugly Man when he did
great.
Shaba. Kim was funny.
Yeah.
Damon was definitely funny.
All of them was funny, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that was the thing is that, you couldn't really argue with the results. And people did, there were lots of, mumblings and people, I know that when like Sean came on the show, I think it was when Sean, or maybe, I think it was when Sean came on the show. I remember Tommy said to me, Tommy Davidson, he felt like, because Tommy was kind of like in that second banana role. He was always like the supporting guy and felt like he wasn't getting his like, his characters on. He was always doing somebody else's sketches. And I think when Sean came on, he did feel that like, oh, now I got to compete with another one of his brothers, like there's another guy who's leapfrogging me. So, I mean, look, that's those guys have they have ego, they have all that stuff. And so, yeah, that was a running thing. But as Kenan said to me when I asked him about it, it never became just the Wayans. I mean, when you think about the breakout stars of that show, I mean, yes, sure, Damon was a huge star coming out of that show, but so was Jim Carrey, so was Jamie Foxx, so was David Allen Greer. It wasn't just the Wayans show.
Now, who are some people that you wanted to interview that you didn't get to? I always wonder, after I read the book and I was trying to see if this came back up, Eddie Murphy and Kenan Ivory Wayans were very good friends. They were very close before In Living Color started. And then they had a discrepancy over the movie Raw, right, where Kenan got writing credit for Raw. And I guess, was it after that Eddie just didn't mess with him?
Oh, no, I don't think Eddie, I mean, look, that whole thing, which you're talking about, where, Kenan wanted writing credit and for a joke he added to Raw, and I think Eddie's manager at the time told me that he thought it was like out of bounds for Kenan to ask for that. I don't even know if Eddie thought it was that out of bounds or if Eddie was really that upset about it. I mean, that's certainly not the reason why Eddie didn't talk to me for the book, which I definitely asked. I mean, Eddie just
don't talk to nobody.
Right.
Thank you. I mean, if he had talked, I had to ask the question, but I mean, if he had come back and said, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you, I would have been shocked.
So were they ever still close after In Living
Oh,
Color?
I think they were. I think they were. I think they, I don't know the ins and outs of their relationship, but that whole crew, like Eddie,
The Black Pack,
Eddie and Kenan and Arsenio and Paul Mooney, like all those guys, and Robert Townsend, all those guys, shared that bond. Now, what was interesting is that at that time when they were all tight, Eddie was already above. Eddie had already done 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop. He was a star, and so there was this sort of, especially between Kenan and Arsenio, there was this sort of like, who's next?
That's why you see on In Living Color they did all those Arsenio sketches.
Oh, they went
Arsenio
at
looked like
Arsenio.
he had a big butt.
Yeah.
And the long finger.
Yeah, Kenan and Arsenio definitely had like a rivalry, and it got pretty. I think it got pretty heated at a time.
Which was wild though, because they both was on Fox, and you kind of like you needed Arsenio, you needed that platform, like
that time
for
sure
everything
did,
everybody was doing, movies, television shows, you needed that.
I think it was just it's like two guys who are both young, ambitious, hungry, and again like guys with egos, and they wanted to show that they were the guy, they were the the alpha, and I think at the time, I mean, I don't know. It's funny when I asked Keenan about it. He was like, "Oh, yeah, we went at each other. It got a little rough. I don't forget what the exact quote was, but we were just both trying to get in our licks on each other, and then he couldn't. And then he sort of said, and I think I got the best ones. Like there's still that little.
Right.
Like, he wants to make sure that he feels like but that's just those guys are competitive.
Now, for the book, did you lie to people and say, "Hey, this is a Living Color book autobiography we're doing," just to get interviews? Or
What do you mean, like
how'd you get the interviews?
Like it was
What'd you
authorized?
tell
Oh,
them?
no. It wasn't authorized. I mean, it was just, I
Right.
called people up.
Working on his book, right?
I'm working on this book. I mean, a lot of the interviews I had, there were a good number of interviews I had already done for the magazine story, so that helped. So I already had, like, I could already say, well, I already talked to these people, and that always kind of helps. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just, you're either going through their publicist or their manager or whoever, or if you're lucky enough, you're going right to them and saying, I'm doing this. I want you. I want to talk to you. But the thing is so there's however many cast members there were over that season's 25 cast members or 20 cast members, whatever it was. But then, of course, beyond that, you've got producers, writers, all these people who are all happy.
Executives.
They're all happy to talk. No one asked them to talk to them
Right.
at all. And so, you can build the whole framework around that, because you've got the whole story there. There were probably 100 and some writers, and I probably talked to almost all of them.
Wow.
So that's going to give you the day-to-day of this happened and then that happened. And then, once you start adding in the cast members, it all kind of comes together.
Whatever happened to Kelly Caulfield?
She's still around. She's, it's interesting because she was on that show. She was a huge part of that show.
Yeah.
I mean, she was like in tons of sketches. She was very funny. She was, and Jim was the white guy. She was the white girl.
Didn't she marry somebody that was one of the...
Yes. She married. So she married Steve Park, who was the Asian guy who was on season 3. But they didn't get together on the show. They got together, several years after they ran into each other. I forget the exact story, but so she still has a career as kind of like a character actress, but it just didn't take off for her, which is, it's just interesting how that happened.
Did you talk to her?
Oh yeah,
Okay,
I talked to her, and she was really, really cooperative, and I wouldn't say I'm still in touch with her like we hang out or talk all the time,
Right,
but I'll,
Do you think In Living Color gets too much credit for J-Lo?
yeah.
I agree.
I mean, and I didn't, and by the way, I didn't talk to J-Lo. Maybe not that shocking, but she.
But you did talk to Rosie.
I did talk to Rosie.
Rosie Perez.
But I didn't talk to J-Lo. But the thing about her being a dancer on the show is like kind of more trivia than like that fundamental to the show. I mean, she was a dancer. She certainly came in there, and and it's hard to tell, like, did people remember her and the things she did? Because
People remembered her as a kid.
Right, but I'm saying, like,
No, we didn't.
When I was a kid, we knew who
she was.
we knew who
She was
She was the standout.
right, she was-
No, the dark-skinned one, man. The pretty dark-skinned
You know
one.
what else is interesting?
J-Lo didn't even come to like the 3rd season.
They didn't
she
even want to
did.
put her on at first because they said she was too chubby.
Well, yeah. So there was the whole thing, and this was Rosie talked a fair bit about this, but Kenan supposedly, now Kenan doesn't admit to saying this, but Rosie says that Kenan told her, yeah, she needs to lose a few pounds and cut her hair and all this stuff. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think Rosie was just trying to get a little dig in on
They
Jennifer.
didn't get along too well.
No, they didn't. But anyway, I think that of all the people who came from the show and became big stars, she was going to become a star anyway. She was, if it wasn't going to be like this, happened to be that first thing that she got. But she had so much ambition, and so she was going to get something else.
Yeah, because I think she got to Living Color maybe 3rd season,
Right.
and she was only for 2 years.
She was there for 2 years, and then she got a supporting role in some other show that no one remembers, and then
I remember that.
yeah, I mean but and I mean I think that the thing that people remember about her, the other dancers remember about her on the show, was that she was ambitious and she had sharp elbows, and she was like, there was this idea that, oh, she's looking out for Jennifer Lopez, and you know what, like that may be sour grapes or maybe whatever, but yeah, like you don't become Jennifer Lopez without having ambition.
Right.
You know what else you touch on in the book, but it's not too much in depth, about the women on the show and how much more difficult it was. They called it kind of a hazing for the women that were working there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, especially I think in the writers' room. Like, I mean, comedy was, and to a certain extent still is, like a boys' club, especially behind the scenes. But there was no politically correct. There was no sort of sensitivity about that. There was no workplace harassment. It was like you could bring it and you could take it and dish it out, or you couldn't. And I mean, that went for the guys as well as the women behind the scenes. But it was hard. To their credit, I suppose, there were a reasonable number of women writers on that show. If there were 100 writers, there were probably 15 to 20 women, which, okay, that's not 50%. But at the time, it was more of a boys' club than it is now.
How many of the writers were white and how many were black?
Probably a similar percentage, but more. Well, I bet you it was 2/3 to 3/4 were white, which is surprising, except that, going back to what I was saying before, there had been so few opportunities for black comedy writers, for like black creatives before this era, that when they were looking to hire writers, it was sort of like, well, no one's got a resume for this. No one's, who are we going to hire? And so they were, they wanted to hire more black writers. They were, hiring people from college newspapers. They hired one guy, this guy Michael Anthony Snowden, who ended up being, a good writer on the show. Somebody saw him dancing at a club, and like people were gathered around him. He was telling funny stories, and they hired him to be a writer on the show. He ended up being a good writer on the show. A big contributor.
Because that's hard to be like a white person trying to write these jokes that are racial jokes about sketches about a black community when you're white. Yeah,
and it was, talking to the writers about that. Kenan had a funny thing that he used to do. Like, so he wanted that writers' room to be completely, sort of open. Anything goes. Say what you think is funny. We're gonna, I'll tell you when you've gone too far. And so people went too far, and I would love to see the sketches that went too far on A Living Color. Well, so I'll give you one example. Is that this one white writer came in, and on his first day he wanted to show, I'm gonna go for it. They're gonna know how crazy I am. And so he pitched this sketch, which was ghetto action figures, and so they'd have like pregnant, like 13-year-old gang sister. They'd have like it was not okay. Like, and I gotta see it. Yeah, so I can't say it's not okay till I see it. It might be hilarious. But so anyway, but so Kenan had this thing that he would do when he felt like something went on the wrong side of that line of like, it's funny. Are we having fun with black culture, or are we making fun of black culture? Exactly.
That's the same issue Dave Chappelle has.
Right.
And people are laughing at you, and you don't want to have that. So
Kenan's way of letting people know was he would like hum the Deliverance music, like that banjo music. Like, it was like, you're going to redneck. You're going to, we're making fun. And so
squeal like a pig.
Exactly. So that was like his way of letting people know. But he wanted, but to his credit, it wasn't like you stepped over the line, you're fired. It was like, you stepped over the line, try again. Like, he wanted, and that's why you had to have a thick skin. You had to, be able to understand that, people are just trying to be funny.
Right.
And sometimes that, it steps on the wrong side of that line.
When I think about shows like In Living Color, it pains me that they didn't shatter the glass ceiling of PC culture. Because I feel like once a show like that should be the bar. If we can get away with that, then we should still be able to do that type of stuff in 2018. Not everybody's so pussy.
I think it's way worse now.
Yeah.
I mean, back then,
Can't even get close to what they did.
yeah, back then, I mean, and talking about like men on film,
Couldn't
like,
do that.
No
Definitely
chance.
And then they did the
chance.
football.
Do
They did
handyman.
the football
No,
one.
no, yeah. And you know, it's funny because I talked to Damon about both of those, and especially about Handyman. He was like, so he was born with a club foot. You know, like you wouldn't necessarily know that, but he had a bunch of surgeries, and he kind of, you know, walked. He used to say like, people thought like I walked with this limp, but people thought it was like a crip walk, like, you know, like they thought he was just being cool, so he got away with it. But his point was that I know what it's like to be, you know, have a handicap. You know, I'm not making fun of it. I'm giving these people a superhero.
And they screened it in front of.
Exactly. Right. So they screened it for like, you know, a disabled group or something, and they loved it. And then they loved it. They
Why
thought,
wouldn't they?
yeah. And so, you know, and in the same way, not to say that there weren't things in Men on Film that, you know, the way we think about LGBT stuff now, you know, makes it does make you squirm a little bit. But those sketches were hugely popular in the gay community.
Yeah, and they normalized gay
Exactly.
people.
Like those, like if you were gay in 1991, you didn't see gay people on TV.
No.
There was no representation at all. So this was a chance, you know, for people to see something they could actually identify with. And what you know, Keenan said, what David Ongrier all said about Men on Film was that, you know, it wasn't really, we weren't making we were making fun of, I guess they said it was not mean-spirited. It was like we were having fun with the culture. We weren't making fun of it.
And they were funny, and it probably was more dangerous for them in that time to do that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, they probably got so much flack, Damon and David, like, oh, y'all gay.
Oh, right.
In that era, that was a super homophobic era.
Sure. There was, I think it was, I forget who told me the story, but, you know, Kenan used to do the Mike Tyson impression on the show.
He told us that story up here.
And so,
On Mike
right,
Preston.
exactly.
Ran to Mike Tyson.
So Kenan used to do the Mike Tyson impression, and Damon used to do Men on Film. But there was apparently, Kenan was thinking about doing Men on Film, and Damon also had a Mike Tyson impression. I don't know if they flipped a coin or whatever. But the joke was that, like, one of you is going to get all sorts of weird, you know, reactions for doing Men on Film. You're going to get dudes coming on to you, whatever it's going to be. And the other one is going to have to deal with Mike Tyson, you know, getting up in your face. So it's like, pick your poison. And obviously, and yeah, like you said, Kenan
And the
told
Nation of Islam, I'm sure the Nation of Islam pressed them when they was...
with Farrakhan. You know, Damon told me that I guess Farrakhan's son told Damon that Farrakhan was a fan.
Yeah, he
of that.
loved it.
wow.
Which was I thought was very cool. You know, and I think Damon thought it was cool too, because he didn't, you know, want to step on the wrong side of that.
Did you talk to Deidre Lang?
Yeah, I did. I
Okay.
did. Yeah, I talked to her at length, and she was great. I believe she was the only Fly Girl who was there all 5 seasons.
Yeah, that's the one I remember, the
Yeah.
pretty dark-skinned Deidre.
Yeah.
The Fly Girls actually had an album deal at one point.
They did. That's a crazy story. So they were gonna be like a pop group. This is like before the Spice Girls. They were gonna be
I
like,
remember something like that.
so they had a deal.
Or a TV show or something.
They had a deal.
They had a TV
with,
show deal too, right?
Yep, they had a TV show that they were gonna do, but they had a major label deal with. Now I should remember this off the top of my head. Was
Where
it
Paula Abdul was signed? I remember.
right?
you
Right.
said
Was
that.
it Universal?
MCA?
I think it was Universal MCA, something like
I
that.
probably think it was MCA.
Anyway,
I was MC Scat Cat back in the day. That's how I know that.
and so yeah, it was going to happen, but you know, I talked to the record executive, and he was like, "Well, if I can be honest about it, it's like there were 2 problems." He's like, "1, they weren't as attractive as I thought they were going to be,
Wow.
and
man.
2, they couldn't sing." And
Yeah,
so
that would be a
like
problem.
those, and so but it kind of all fell apart. Although it was going around. They did demos, and Rosie was like their manager, and it was going around for a long time. Now there's a story which I will tell, even though I'm not 100%. I don't think it's true. I mean, I think it's part true, but there's this story that more than one person told me about how they lost the record deal, which was that Paula Abdul was on the label, and they knew Paula through like dancing and all that stuff, and they were at the record label office, and all the Fly Girls went into the bathroom. There was at some point, and they were talking shit about Paula, and supposedly, and this is where it just seems too off the wall to be true. Supposedly, Paula
was in the stall.
In the stall, walks out.
Heard ya.
Walks out of the stall, says to the label, they're off or I'm leaving. And at the time, she was huge, and so that's the story. I think that
shit. I don't know if Living Color needs a movie or a Netflix series because I would love to see that episode.
See, but I don't think. I think that there's a version of that I think that's exaggerated. Like people, that's exactly how it was told to me, but I think people are kind of embellishing. I think
maybe she did say I don't want them on the label.
I think Paula was not comfortable with them being on the label, but I don't think that. I just can't believe that the bathroom incident just seems too easy. It just seems too.
Looks great in the movie.
Yeah, that's amazing, man.
Well, there's a lot of great gems, and Homie don't play that, so I appreciate you coming through. And you're actually going to be at the book club with me tonight, so I'm excited to tell some more of these stories and also just discuss the whole culture because this was all during the Rodney King incident happened. They actually did something with Fire Marshal Bill.
They did. Fire Marshal Bill goes to the L.A. riots.
And that's a hard one to touch, but that really affected and impacted the show so much because that happened right in the middle of in Living Color, but just so many different things that I learned from reading this book. So I do appreciate you putting all this together and coming out here really just to do these interviews with us.
Hey, I appreciate so much you guys having me on. I mean, it's fantastic.
Okay. Well, there you have it. It's David Peisner. Did I say it right?
Peisner.
Said it right the first time.
Said it right the first time, yeah.
It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.